Laying ceramic tiles in a 10 by 12 kitchen was no easy job, especially since each tile was only 4 by 4 inches. Caleb Harland carefully spread the adhesive, making sure every piece lined up perfectly with the one before it. He took quiet pride in his precision, knowing even the slightest mistake could ruin the whole project. At Rivers Renovation and Remodeling, perfection wasn't just expected, it was the standard, and Caleb made sure he met it every time. As he finished another row, his wife Renee called him. Caleb braced himself before answering. Renee's voice, once warm and full of laughter, had turned sharp and impatient over the years. She skipped the greetings and got straight to the point. "How much longer?" she asked. Caleb estimated about 3 more hours to finish Braden's kitchen. Before he could explain further, the call ended. Renee had already hung up. The usual wave of frustration washed over him, but he pushed it aside. No matter what, he wouldn't let it affect his work. He focused on the tiles, making sure everyone was placed just right. As he worked, his mind drifted back to the past, back to when he first met Renee. It had been decades ago, in his early days at Rivers Renovation and Remodeling. She had rushed into the office, apologizing over and over to her father, Robert Eastwood, for her bad grades in high school. Caleb, just 21 at the time, barely glanced at her. He noticed her short, stocky frame and wild, unkempt hair before turning back to his tools. He had no interest in drama, and Robert made it clear Renee was off limits. "She's my daughter," he warned. Caleb had simply nodded, keeping his thoughts to himself. But Renee didn't let her father's warning stop her. She made sure Caleb noticed her, smiling at him, flirting every chance she got. He found her advances more irritating than anything else. At 17, she was chubby, covered in acne, and far too childish for his taste. One afternoon, as he struggled with a heavy bag of cement, she strolled up to him. "I turn 18 on Saturday," she said, leaning in as if that meant something to him. "Good for you," he answered flatly, not even looking up. When she asked for a birthday present, he smirked and said, "Close your eyes. What do you see?" "Nothing? That's your gift." Even though Caleb showed no interest, Renee's mother, Clara Eastwood, seemed determined to push them together. She convinced Robert to invite Caleb to Renee's 18th birthday party. Later, she even pressured him into taking Renee to prom. Out of obligation, he went. He posed for pictures, danced awkwardly, and gave her a quick, reluctant goodnight kiss. A few days later, Robert confronted Caleb, accusing him of breaking Renee's heart by ignoring her afterward. So, reluctantly, Caleb asked her out again. By their 5th date, she had given him her virginity. 5 months after their rushed wedding, their daughter Lauren was born. For Caleb, the years that followed were full of sacrifices. He took on the hardest jobs at Rivers Renovation, always suspecting that Robert assigned him the toughest work on purpose. For the first 16 years of marriage, Renee made an effort to be a good wife. She cooked his favorite meals, stayed quiet while he watched his beloved Denver Broncos, and even tried to lose weight, though without much success. Her acne eventually cleared, but the scars remained. Things changed after Lauren started school and Renee got a job at the library. The pay wasn't much, but the health benefits were a relief. Then, after their 16th wedding anniversary, Renee's cousin Tessa moved to town. Tessa was loud and opinionated, and under her influence, Renee became more combative. She started neglecting things at home, constantly complaining. What had once been small annoyances turned into a habit. Every night, Renee, Tessa, and Tessa's husband Jared found ways to be out of the house. Caleb picked up the slack without a word, cooking and cleaning as needed. But the strain was impossible to ignore. Even Lauren, who had learned to mend her own school uniforms and help with chores, seemed to blame him rather than her mother. That day, Caleb finished Braden's kitchen exactly 3 hours after Renee's call. His back ached, a painful reminder of his age, but the job was done right. He packed up his tools and thought about how much had changed. When he called Robert to report the finished work, the old man's voice was slurred from the stroke that had nearly killed him. Clara, who had fought through cancer and a double mastectomy, had spent her last years caring for Robert before she passed. Now, Robert depended on his sons, and Caleb helped whenever he could. Renee, once so close to her mother, had slowly drifted away from her family. That evening, when Caleb walked through the door, the smell of pork chops, mashed potatoes, and green beans filled the house, his favorite meal. It was a rare treat since Renee had put the family on a strict heart-healthy diet after Robert's stroke. She had lost 40 pounds but was still overweight, and her bland cooking had become a running joke. Caleb often teased Lauren, saying she had picked a college far from home just to escape her mother's food. Lauren never denied it. That night, as Renee stood at the stove, Caleb leaned in, trying to kiss her, but she waved him off, wrinkling her nose in disgust. Caleb tossed his clothes into the hamper and stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the sweat and exhaustion from the long day. The physical demands of his job had been tough when he was 21. Now, at 45, they were downright brutal. His body wasn't the same, but Grant, Sean, and Ryan didn't seem to notice. They kept saying hiring extra help wasn't an option, not with the growing pile of medical bills from Robert's rehab. After drying off, Caleb caught a blurry glimpse of himself in the foggy mirror. His muscles were still defined, but he didn't bother looking too closely. Dressed in a t-shirt and shorts, he headed downstairs just as Renee placed a slice of dessert on his plate. "Hot apple pie," she said, setting a frosted mug of beer in front of him with a little extra flair. Caleb's stomach turned at the sight of the beer. The last time she had served him one like that, it hadn't gone well. The memory rushed back, her 37th birthday, just months before their 17th anniversary. Lauren had been out with friends that night, and Renee had poured him a drink before starting a conversation he hadn't seen coming. "There's something I need to talk to you about," she had said, making small talk at first. Caleb, nearly done with his beer, had finally told her to get to the point. What she said next had stunned him. She told him Tessa and Jared had an open marriage, then asked if he had ever thought about cheating. "Of course, I've thought about it," Caleb admitted, keeping his voice calm. "I'm a man. I notice things, like that girl Cassie at the gas station." Renee had laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. It was sharp, mocking. "Cassie? As if you'd ever have a chance with her." Caleb had let the comment slide. "But I'm married," he said simply. "It doesn't matter what crosses my mind. That's where it ends." "Did you really think I'd act on it? Don't you think you could do something without consequences?" she asked, her tone shifting. "I can't," Caleb answered, his voice firm. "We made vows, Renee. Before our family, our friends. I take them seriously." Then she brought up the idea of renewing their vows. Caleb shut that down immediately. "The ones we made are enough. Tessa and Jared can live however they want, but that's not us. It never will be." But Renee didn't let it go. She brought it up again and again. By the third time, Caleb snapped. "If this is how I'm supposed to prove my love for you, then maybe I don't love you as much as I thought," he told her. The fourth time she mentioned it, Caleb was done talking. He picked up the phone and called Robert. "Hello, Robert," he said, keeping his voice steady. Renee's face drained of color as she realized what was happening. When Caleb asked for Clara, her panic only grew. "Renee has something to share with you," he said, handing her the phone. "Go ahead. Tell your dad what Tessa told you." Renee tried to avoid it, but Caleb didn't let her off the hook. She fumbled through a vague explanation before ending the call in frustration. "You're despicable," she hissed, furious. Caleb met her anger with a warning. "Bring this up again, and our marriage is over. I'll file for divorce." That was the last time Renee mentioned an open marriage. Over time, Tessa and Jared stopped coming around as much. Caleb didn't know if that was on purpose or just how things worked out. Now, years later, as Renee poured him another badly foamed beer, Caleb felt that same unease creeping back. "I'll be 40 next Tuesday," she said, trying to sound casual. "I know," Caleb replied between bites of pork chop. "All this time, I've only ever been with one man," she continued, her voice sharpening. "Well, lucky for me," Caleb joked, hoping to lighten the mood. "And you've probably been with, 10 women by now?" she asked, watching him closely. "Life's funny like that," he said, taking a sip of beer. Renee ignored his response. "I think I deserve some freedom. Tessa and I are heading to Vegas next week. She found a good deal at a casino. While we're there, we might meet some guys." Just a date or two. Nothing serious. It might even make me appreciate you more. Caleb kept eating, though his appetite was fading fast. The sauce is almost right, he said, trying to keep his anger in check. You're avoiding the point, Renee snapped. This isn't about sauce. It's about me exploring new experiences. So, what? You expect me to support you cheating on me? Caleb asked, his voice calm but ice cold. It's not cheating. It's growth, she argued, crossing her arms. You can either accept it, or we can get a divorce. Your choice. Caleb set down his fork and pushed his plate away. Fine. I'll start the divorce process tomorrow. Renee's confidence wavered. Wait. Divorces cost money. We need to think about this. What's there to think about? Caleb shot back. You've already decided. You're running off to Vegas with your shady cousin, ignoring our bills and calling it freedom. Let's be clear. It's cheating, Renee. Plain and simple. And I won't stay married to a cheater. It's just a week, she said weakly. A minute, a day, a week. It makes no difference, Caleb replied, cutting into his pie. By the way, you used that fake sugar again, didn't you? He pushed his plate aside and stood up. I'll see a lawyer tomorrow. Leaving Renee speechless in the kitchen, Caleb climbed the stairs. Another long workday awaited him, but for the first time in a while, he felt a strange sense of clarity. Grant wouldn't need him until the federal savings and loan project got approval, giving him just enough time to figure out the next chapter of his life. But Caleb, you never listen. Renee's voice rang out behind him, sharp and accusing. Sure, he called back without turning around. And you never heard me either. I told you exactly what would happen if you brought this up again. We're getting divorced. In the small, cluttered office, Caleb powered up the old computer. It was slow, but it worked. He searched for divorce attorneys and found Diana Holloway's website. The online form was simple, so he filled it out and hit submit. Not long after, he got a call confirming an appointment for 10 a.m. the next morning. Later that night, Renee came upstairs after cleaning the kitchen. She undressed and slid into bed, pressing herself against him. Caleb didn't hesitate. He pulled away. No thanks, he said flatly, turning to face the other direction. Good night. By 5:30 a.m., Caleb was up, as always. Even when work was slow, he stuck to his routine. Quietly, he left the bedroom and closed the door behind him. In the kitchen, he brewed a pot of coffee and checked his email on his phone. There was a message from Diana Holloway's office, listing the documents he needed to bring to their meeting. He thought about pouring another cup, but decided against it when he heard Renee moving around upstairs. If she wanted coffee, she could make it herself. As he scrolled through the news, Renee's voice cut through the quiet. She was on the phone, her tone sharp and annoyed. No, I told him to give it to me, she said, clearly frustrated. Moments later, she walked into the kitchen, stopping short when she saw Caleb sitting at the table. She ended the call quickly and glared at him. What are you doing here? Like I said, Grant hasn't gotten the green light for the federal savings and loan project, so I have the day off, Caleb answered casually. The grass is too wet to mow, so I figured I'd catch up on the news. Did you hear Montgomery is thinking about opening a second location? You could have saved me some coffee, she grumbled. You can ask Tessa to make you some, Caleb said, rinsing his mug and setting it in the sink. Later that morning, at Diana Holloway's office, she reviewed their financials with a practiced eye. A sharp-featured brunette, she adjusted her stylish glasses as she flipped through the paperwork. I see you recently refinanced at 4.9%, she noted. That's right, Caleb said. Our daughter's in her last year of college, and my in-laws' medical bills were huge. The deductibles were ridiculous, plus the funeral expenses, and Eastwood's business has been struggling. Ryan screwed up the scheduling on a few jobs, and that cost us, too. Diana nodded. And how do you think divorcing your employer's daughter will affect your job? I'm cutting ties with the company, Caleb said with a small smile. As for Renee, her job at the library won't be affected. By Friday, Grant still hadn't gotten approval to start the federal savings and loan renovations, so Caleb stayed home and worked on small repairs. When Renee called, her voice was cold. What is this? Some kind of scam? She snapped. Oh, you got the papers, Caleb said calmly. By the way, what's wrong with the first-floor bathroom? You said it needed fixing, but I couldn't find the issue. The lock sticks, she said curtly. We'll talk when I get home. There's nothing left to talk about, Caleb replied firmly. Talking hasn't helped, especially when you listen to Tessa more than you listen to me. I'm done talking. Fine. I see what's going on, she said bitterly. Goodbye. I don't want a divorce, Renee added quietly. It was rare for her to sound vulnerable. And I don't want to be married to someone unfaithful, Caleb shot back. Anything else? No, she muttered before hanging up. A little later, Caleb's phone lit up. Robert was calling. Setting down his screwdriver, he answered. Hello? Robert didn't waste time. His voice was gruff and irritated. What the hell is going on between you and Renee? Caleb kept his response simple. Tessa and Jared have an open marriage. They convinced Renee it was a good idea. I told her no, but she gave me an ultimatum. Accept it or get divorced. So, I chose divorce. Robert tried to argue, using guilt and emotions, but Caleb cut him off. Sir, with all due respect, that's a family matter, for your 3 sons and your daughter. It's not my responsibility anymore. And honestly, I don't want to stay tied to a business that's been bleeding money for 3 years. That evening, Renee came home with backup. As expected, Tessa and Jared weren't far behind. They wasted no time getting involved. Jared spoke first, smug as ever. You see, Caleb, Tessa and I have a strong marriage. Her meeting new people only makes us stronger. Exactly, Tessa chimed in. We're open and honest. No secrets. It's made us closer. Good to know, Caleb said. Standing up, he turned to Renee. After the divorce, you'll be free to live however you want. Jared smirked. So, you think Renee should deny her needs just because of your insecurities? Caleb grinned, showing all his teeth. If believing that helps you sleep at night, go right ahead. And with that, he walked out of the room, leaving them speechless. That night, Renee tried to rekindle some intimacy, but Caleb met her efforts with a smirk. Get some rest, Renee, he said. You've got a busy day ahead, don't you? As usual, he woke at 5:30 a.m. and got out of bed without bothering to be quiet. Downstairs, he brewed his morning coffee and scrolled through the news. Shaking his head at the latest political nonsense, he muttered, These politicians should have to live by their own rules. No lifetime perks, no private health care, just the same insurance they force on everyone else. Around 11, there was a knock at the door. When Caleb opened it, Jared stood there, trying to step inside. Caleb blocked him with a firm hand. What do you need? He asked. I'm here to pick up Renee for the airport, Jared said, making another attempt to push past. I'll let her know you're here, Caleb replied, shutting the door in his face. A few minutes later, Renee came downstairs, suitcase in hand. Why didn't you tell me Jared and Tessa were waiting outside? She snapped. Oh, right, Caleb said dryly. Jared and Tessa are here. He turned back to the sitcom he had been watching. Must you act so immature? Renee asked, frustration clear in her voice. Caleb sidestepped smoothly as she leaned in, expecting a kiss that never came. We'll talk when I get back, she said firmly. No, we won't, Caleb replied flatly, keeping his focus on his day. After finishing his show and enjoying a solid meal, Caleb tackled a home project, painting the front door a soft, pale yellow. The color looked great against the red brick, making the house feel fresh. From the garage, their tabby cat, Samson, let out a loud meow. Caleb chuckled and wiped his hands. Hang on, buddy. I'll let you out once this paint dries. Later, upstairs, he handled a few financial matters. First, he canceled all their shared credit cards. He didn't know if Renee had separate accounts, but he wasn't about to keep funding her whims or her cousin Tess's extravagant lifestyle. Next, he accessed Renee's personal bank account and withdrew half the funds. He did the same with their joint account, where he was the sole contributor. Using the bank's website, he opened a new account in his name and deposited the money there. Taking it a step further, he removed his name from the utilities and cable TV accounts. A confirmation email from Preston Vale Power and Light said the cancellation wouldn't take effect until the end of the billing cycle. Doesn't matter, Caleb muttered. He was already done with it all. By evening, hunger struck again, and he decided to treat himself. He ordered from Sloan's Pizza, a forbidden indulgence during his marriage. Maybe this'll give me a heart attack, he joked to himself. At the pizzeria, he paired his meal with a cold draft beer, savoring every bite. Even the waitress, who was on the heavier side, caught his eye. He flirted lightly, but when she tapped his wedding ring with her long nails, his mood soured. He forced a smile, left a tip, and walked out. Back in his truck, he pulled off the ring, wrestling with it for a moment before finally slipping it off and tossing it into the cup holder. Forever love, huh, Renee? He muttered bitterly. Guess that didn't age well. The low fuel light blinked on, so he pulled into a gas station. He had planned to put in just $10, but at the last second, he decided to fill the tank completely. Filling 22 gallons sure takes a while, he muttered as the pump ran. Inside the convenience store, he grabbed a six-pack of Budweiser and spotted a pint of strawberry ice cream in the freezer. Perfect. At the counter, he recognized the petite brunette behind the register. Shannon Peacock had replaced Cassie, the station's former heartthrob. Shannon grinned as she stepped onto a milk crate to meet his eye level. Hey, shorty, she teased. Your wife out of town? She asked playfully, eyeing his purchases. My wife's gone for good, Caleb replied casually. Her gaze flicked to his bare left hand, and she smiled. So, where are you taking me on our first date? Caleb smirked. As lovely as you are, Shannon, why would you want to date an old guy like me? Renee's 40th birthday came and went on Tuesday. By Wednesday, Lauren called. Eastwood's renovation and remodeling, Caleb speaking, he answered. Dad, yesterday was Mom's birthday, Lauren said, her tone pointed. Yeah? So? Caleb replied, scratching his jaw. Why didn't you call her? She pressed. I didn't want to, he answered honestly. I just didn't, kiddo. Why? She asked, pushing for more. You'll understand soon enough, Caleb said. Your mother thinks turning 40 means she gets to date other men. What? Lauren exclaimed, shocked. You heard me, Caleb said. She's married. Married women don't date other men. That's so old-fashioned, Dad, Lauren giggled. Goodbye, Lauren, Caleb said, ending the call before his frustration could get the better of him. 10 minutes later, Renee's name popped up on his phone. Sighing, he answered, Eastwood's renovation and remodeling. Hi, Caleb, she said tersely. So, how's life at 40? He asked lightly, though he didn't care about the answer. This isn't a joke, Caleb, Renee snapped. Agreed, he said. And you're welcome for canceling the credit cards. Why didn't you call on my birthday? She demanded. I didn't want to, he replied bluntly. Maybe whoever you're with now wished you a happy birthday. Grow up, Caleb, Renee retorted. Really, Renee? He shot back. Adults honor their commitments and respect their vows. Who's Isabella? Renee asked suddenly, her tone sharp. Isabella? She married Elton Webster, the bank manager. She's a realtor now. Found a potential buyer for the house, Caleb explained. We're not selling the house, Caleb, Renee yelled. You really can't be surprised, Caleb replied. We need to settle that second mortgage. Isabella says we might even have to bring cash to close the deal. We are not selling the house. Renee repeated, louder this time. I've already moved your furniture into storage, Unit 212 at Easy Warehouse on Independence Road. Your dad has the key, he said coolly. Renee's voice wavered. Oh my God, Caleb, I need to get home. Your dad couldn't pick up Samson, so I dropped him off at Grant's, Caleb added casually. Grant? But Grant has Dobermans. Renee shrieked. Whoops, Caleb said with a chuckle. No wonder he was so eager to adopt the cat. Ignoring her frantic protests, he ended the call and set the phone on the counter. Upstairs, he browsed the internet while the phone rang over and over. He ignored it, muttering, maybe your mom's new boyfriend can finance your final year of school. After shutting down the computer, he shaved, showered, and dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. Feeling a sense of finality, he tossed his cell phone into the trash, wheeled the garbage can to the curb, and stepped outside. Going to miss you, Caleb, Voltaire, his neighbor, called out. Voltaire, you won't, Caleb replied, shaking his hand. The most we ever talked was when you complained about Lauren's friends blasting their music. You were the perfect neighbor, Voltaire said with a smirk. Never borrowed anything. Never asked me to feed your cat or collect your mail when you were out of town. Glad to have made an impression, Caleb said wryly. I bet the next folks will be all over me, Voltaire teased as he walked away. You brought that on yourself by being so friendly, Caleb called after him with a grin. Meanwhile, Renee struggled with the front door, staring in disbelief as her key refused to turn the lock. Frustrated, she pulled out her phone and tried to dial the number on the gold standard real estate sign in the yard. But her fully charged phone refused to cooperate. She snatched Tess's phone instead, while Jared prowled around, checking the windows. Gold standard real estate. Isabella Webster speaking, Isabella answered cheerfully. This is Renee Harland, Renee snapped. My key isn't working. What's going on? Ah, the Harland's ex, right? Isabella replied in a syrupy tone. Ex? Renee spat, caught off guard. I need to sign some paperwork. Well, guess what? I have clients interested in the property. Isabella said brightly. The house isn't for sale. Renee barked, her patience fraying. Then are you planning to buy out Mr. Harland? Isabella asked smoothly. Because the Ellingtons are ready to make an offer. Renee fumed, repeating that the house was not for sale, and immediately called Caleb. You idiot, she hissed as he answered with his usual greeting. Rivers Renovations and Remodeling. Jared, tapping the steering wheel impatiently, sighed. Can we drop you somewhere else? My cat. Renee gasped, squeezing back into the vehicle. She called Grant next, frustration mounting. Did Caleb give Samson to you? She demanded. With my Dobermans around? That cat wouldn't last an hour, Grant snapped. No, Dad has him. But heads up, Dad's physical therapist is allergic to cats, so you might want to pick him up sooner rather than later. Tessa groaned from the front seat. How many more calls are you making? Don't you have unlimited minutes? Renee shot back. Nope. Mr. Football here burned through most of them. Tessa grumbled, throwing a glare at Jared. Renee ignored her cousin's complaints and made a final call to her father, Robert, who reluctantly agreed to let her come over. Jared turned the car in that direction, and as Renee walked inside, Tessa and Jared exchanged knowing looks. How'd it go? Jared asked sarcastically as Tessa slid back into the passenger seat. A disaster, Tessa sighed. Jared smirked. Can't imagine why anyone would want her around. Not with you here. Tessa rolled her eyes. Any money from her yet? Almost, Jared said, smirking. But Caleb's making this harder than it needs to be. He canceled her credit cards? Tessa guessed. Yup, but she still has her debit card. ATMs are everywhere, Jared reasoned as he pulled into a gas station. Inside the store, Jared glanced at the beer cooler. He debated grabbing a pack, but hesitated when he saw Tessa watching him through the car window. She honked the horn impatiently. Scowling, he turned away from the cooler and went to the counter, buying nothing. Back in the car, he grumbled about the cashier. What is it with small women and, Jared gestured vaguely annoyed. You know. They just look bigger because they're petite, Tessa corrected impatiently. Now can we just get gas and go? Meanwhile, Renee sat through a brutal tirade from her father. Since his stroke, Robert's sharp tongue had only grown harsher. When was the last time you looked in a mirror? Robert sneered. You look like a fat pig with a face hacked up by an ice pick. Dad, Renee cried, her voice breaking. So what if you're turning 40? Robert growled. Women turn 40 every day, but not all of them betray their families at 40. He gestured toward a thick stack of legal documents sitting on the coffee table. Just then, Samson, her tabby cat, padded into the room, his tail swishing lazily. You'll need a lawyer, Robert grunted. And I need to clean that cat's litter box. God knows what that animal eats, but it stinks to high heaven. He waved toward the stairs. Your old room's still there. I hope betraying us was worth it. 40 years old and still making foolish decisions. That night, Renee lay in her childhood bed, staring at the faded floral wallpaper she and her mother had picked out decades ago. Samson curled up beside her as she switched off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. Her birthday week had started out with so much promise. The flight to Vegas had been smooth, and from the window, the city lights twinkled below like something out of a dream. After checking into their hotel, she and Tessa hit the roulette table before heading to dinner. But the evening took a humiliating turn when her credit cards were declined at the restaurant. The manager's stern expression as he handed her back the third failed card was burned into her memory. She had barely salvaged the moment with her debit card, but when she checked her bank balance, her stomach dropped. Half the money was gone. Caleb, Renee seethed, blaming him for the financial sabotage. Tessa waved it off. Forget about that. We're in Vegas. Don't let it ruin everything. But the night only got worse when Tessa lost $300 at blackjack. That was my $300, Tessa muttered bitterly. Later, at the bar, Renee met a charming young man. Victor, 25, smooth-talking and flirtatious. But their rendezvous ended quickly, 4 minutes, to be exact. Even worse, she caught him trying to swipe her wallet. The next day, her actual birthday, she tried her luck again. She struck up a conversation with a man at a casino, only to be met with a smirk and a cutting remark. Lady, if I wanted to cozy up to a 300-pound woman, I'd stay home with my wife, he said. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he added, you might want to check out a blind convention. Humiliated, Renee spent the rest of the evening nursing a coffee in the hotel lobby, staring at the people around her. Back in her room, she lay in bed in the lace lingerie she had packed, hoping to surprise someone, anyone. Instead, she just stared at the ceiling. Neither Caleb nor Lauren had called. Lauren had sent a short text, but Caleb's silence stung the most. By Saturday, Renee had had enough of Tessa's complaining. But since Tessa had the return tickets, she bit her tongue and played along. Now, back in her childhood bedroom, she sighed heavily. Her birthday month, meant to be a celebration, had become nothing but a series of humiliations. Her eyes landed on a stack of papers on the desk. Samuel Mollygon, a lawyer recommended by Julian Humans from the Prestonvale Public Library, had been reviewing them. As the weight of it all settled on her, Renee realized her fresh start had gotten off to a miserable beginning. Samuel Mollygon didn't waste time with pleasantries. Your husband gets half, and you get half, he said plainly. The house must be sold, and the profits split evenly. Any shared expenses will also be divided. Despite being unemployed, he isn't asking for spousal support. But I don't want a divorce, Renee protested, desperation creeping into her voice. I don't want to lose my home. I don't want to lose my husband. I don't want to miss Harland. Samuel remained unmoved. Unfortunately, what you want doesn't change the legal facts. When one party wants a divorce, the law tends to move in that direction. Can we at least request a consultation? She asked, grasping at straws. Of course, Samuel said, but it likely won't change the outcome. Renee forced a small smile. I'll call Diana's office, she said, as if scheduling a meeting could somehow turn things around. As Samuel continued talking, Renee's mind wandered. Her eyes scanned the bookshelves behind him, only half listening to his ahas and hms. Then he set his phone down and looked at her squarely. Mrs. Harland, here's the issue, he said. His tone was professional but firm. Renee gripped her purse tightly. I'm paying you to avoid issues, not create them, she snapped. Samuel leaned back, unbothered by her attitude. Miss Holloway doesn't know where your husband is, he said. He paid her fee in full and left no forwarding address, only an email. And no, she won't disclose it. Attorney-client privilege protects that information. Oh, Renee murmured, sinking back into her chair, the fight draining out of her. Additionally, Samuel continued, your husband informed Miss Holloway that your daughter will be responsible for her own tuition and dormitory expenses from now on. He mentioned something about starting new traditions. What does that even mean? Renee asked, confused. I don't know, Samuel shrugged, but I suspect Lauren might have a better idea. Renee's 41st birthday arrived with none of the excitement she had once imagined. She dressed for work without much thought. Lauren leaned in to kiss her cheek. Anything you need before I head out? Lauren asked brightly. No, Robert grumbled from his chair. We're fine. Renee forced a cheerful tone. My two main guys will hold the fort, won't they? Robert just grunted. Since his stroke, that was the closest thing to a conversation she got from him. The drive to work was the same as always, from her father's house to the library. When her phone buzzed, she waited until she parked to check it. A single message, "Happy birthday." "Thanks, Lauren," Renee replied flatly. Her mind spiraled with sarcastic thoughts. Thrilled for my birthday, just brimming with joy. But at least she acknowledged the text. Despite losing 25 pounds over the past year, Renee felt more invisible than ever. Caleb was gone, and with him, the warmth she had once relied on. The truth about Tessa and Jared's so-called open marriage had come out too. It had never been about excitement or freedom. It was about financial survival. They weren't partners. They were roommates in a rundown trailer, stuck together by debts rather than love. She missed the way Caleb used to kiss her after a home-cooked meal. She missed the quiet moments that had once defined their life. But the moment she announced she was spending her 40th birthday in Vegas, whatever tenderness was left between them disappeared. Their last interaction had ended with him dodging her kiss entirely. At work, the day crawled by. An hour after Lauren's text, her boss sent a message asking why she was late. Feeling dazed, Renee finally got out of her car and made her way to the library's back entrance. Meanwhile, Lauren's phone buzzed again with a follow-up text from her mom. "Thanks for the birthday wishes." Attached was a picture of a newborn baby. Annette Barbara Harland, 6 pounds 4 ounces, 17 inches. Lauren stared at the image, her lips curling into a bemused smile. Her mom and her baby sister now shared a birthday. She doubted her mom would find the humor in it, and she wasn't sure if her dad even remembered. Elsewhere, Caleb's day moved at a different pace. "We offer carpets, tiles, hardwoods, and laminate flooring," he said into the phone, his voice confident as he assisted a couple choosing hardwood samples. He nodded to Bobby to take over before picking up the blinking line. "Listening, Shorty," Caleb greeted, recognizing the playful tone on the other end. "Guess what, Mr. Shorty?" Shannon's voice teased. "Should I be nervous?" Caleb replied, his smile audible through the phone. "Looks like you and your 7 inches are making me a mom again," Shannon announced, giggling. Caleb blinked in surprise. "Again? Really? Our daughter's still in diapers, and now we're expecting another?" Shannon chuckled. "Blame all that talk about my figure. This is your doing," she teased, maneuvering her daughter's stroller out of Alliance Square Medical Center and into the Texas heat. Caleb laughed, warmth filling his voice. "Where are you now?" "Just left Dr. Pritz's office," Shannon replied. "Meet me at the Stone Grill." "We're celebrating tonight," Caleb said, excitement bubbling up. Shannon brushed her dark hair back, squinting against the sun. At 4 feet 8 inches, she was always aware of her small stature. But in that moment, she felt larger than life. Smiling, she headed off, her heart light despite the heat.